Welcome, everybody. My name is Susan Barber, and I'm the Community Education Manager for the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation. I'm so incredibly grateful to have you all with us this morning, and most especially to be hosting Isabel Stenzel, who is a bereavement coordinator, many things, a national speaker, and I will introduce her more formally in a moment. I am going to turn off the opportunity for you all to unmute yourselves so that you don't accidentally do that in the middle of Isabel's presentation. And I will just say that one thing I have learned in the last 20-something months of being mostly on Zoom is just like in real life where we plan everything at end of life, we make lots of plans about how things will be. The reality is that at any time, whatever's going to happen is actually going to happen. So should anything happen with the Zoom, I will come right back. Isabel is also the co-host, so she will be able to stay on here should anything happen with any kind of internet issues, but just know that we will continue to host this. So thank you all so much for being here. And before we get started with Isabel's talk about grief and the holidays, I just wanted to say a couple of words about the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation. We're a not-for-profit 501c3 organization inspired by the life of psychiatrist, humanitarian, and hospice pioneer, Dr. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. Though Elisabeth is often described as the death and dying lady or the creator of the 5 stages, she referred to herself as the life and living lady. I had the opportunity to meet Elisabeth in 1998, and even post a couple of strokes, she was full of life, vim, and vigor, and it was a remarkable experience to be with her. It's in the spirit of embracing all of life, which includes death, that we further the mission and vision of Elisabeth through the work of the foundation that bears her name. And most especially important to Elisabeth throughout her lifetime was the idea of love, and that love heals. And that is something that I have certainly taken to heart and aligned myself firmly in that court. Particularly at end of life, it can be remarkable to experience unconditional love and serve people in that way. A little bit about our speaker today. Isabel is a bereavement counselor and a coordinator at Mission Hospice, where she counsels and leads support groups for those who are grieving. She has survived nearly 50 years with a life-limiting illness, which has been documented in her memoir, written with her late identical twin, Annabelle, called The Power of Two, a twin triumph over cystic fibrosis, which led to the creation of a documentary film of the same title. Isabel is also the recipient of a double lung transplant and knows all too well both sides of that bedside care thing. Isabel has lectured around the country on topics such as mental health, resiliency, grief and loss, psychosocial aspects of serious illness, end-of-life issues, organ donation, including a TEDx talk at Stanford in 2013 with Annabelle, and then another in 2014 following Annabelle's death. Isabel is a competitive athlete at the Transplant Games of America and was the Female Athlete of the Year in 2014 because she gives those lungs a workout. She lives in Redwood City with her amazing spouse, Andrew, and I am just so grateful that you are with us today. Isabel, I am going to let you, if there's anything that you would like to say, please go ahead, and then I will remove myself from the spotlight here.
Thank you. I, of course, just want to thank Susan. Thank you, Susan, so much, my professional BFF. And we've had a little bit of a work relationship change lately, but it is really good to be in your company, Susan, and to witness yet again you doing your magic with the community, and this time a different community, the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation community. And it's also really good to see some familiar faces, and I look forward to hearing and talking to some of you. Thank you so much for joining, and especially a kudos to Ken Ross for all he does to continue his mother's legacy and continue the dialogue that his mother started with our kind of contemporary ideas and situations that we are all in. So thank you, Susan. Okay, so I am going to welcome everyone. It is good to see you. We have a nice number of people here. And because of the size, we're not going to be able to make this very interactive. Maybe towards the end, I will invite discussion and sharing and dialogue. but actually I will be presenting most of all. And if you are on a tablet or a laptop, I encourage you to participate with the chat if you can in maybe the first hour, 45 minutes to an hour, so that you can feel like you're part of our conversation, and then we will open it up to actual dialogue. So I'm going to be starting with my PowerPoint. I'm the type of person that just likes to see things visually. That's how I learn, and I hope that Susan is welcome to share this PowerPoint with you afterwards. And here you go. Yes, like Susan said, please share where you're from, where you're calling in from, where you're joining us from as I begin our conversation here. It's good to have everyone here. So our topic today is what we are about to enter. In the next week and a half, we'll be having Thanksgiving already. And here at Mission Hospice, we have a 9-week support group coping with the holidays. And why? Why do we do this? Well, for those who have lost a loved one, well, this is considered kind of the season of triggers and more heightened grief, particularly if you're early in your grief experience. There's so much joy and happiness and celebration around the holidays. And some people actually have their own significant days. I remember when I was 18 years old, my best friend died on December 17th, and she was 19. It was the first significant loss I had ever experienced. So I remember rushing to her bedside in the hospital, missing to be with her at the last breath, going through the funeral process, coming home like December 24th or something like that. So it was a very intense time. And every year, even now, it's goodness, 32 years later, I still remember December 17th like it was yesterday. And I have a feeling that some of you may also recognize certain dates, whether it's a death anniversary, a diagnosis anniversary, a birthday, a wedding anniversary, that fall between mid-November to early January, that can make these typical holidays even a little bit more difficult. So that's why we'd like to address this topic and recognize and acknowledge the challenges of coping with grief during this time. So I'm going to invite you, as we often do in the beginning of these workshops and groups, is to just allow yourself to close your eyes. If you feel comfortable doing so, settle into your chair. Notice your back, your buttocks, your feet on the ground, all sort of pressed against the chair or the sofa. And I'm going to ask you if you'd like to take a nice deep breath, allowing that air to enter all the way to the depths of your diaphragm. Feel that oxygen tingle down to your toes. And exhale naturally with no effort, as far as you can go. And inhale yet again. And as you inhale and as you exhale, I invite you to notice any tension in your body. Is it in your neck, your shoulders, your back, your belly, your legs, your hips, your arms or your feet? And as you inhale and exhale, I invite you to breathe out a little bit longer and release some of that tension. Just continue a nice relaxed breathing. You are here. You are breathing. You're alive. You're in your body. And I invite you to take one more deep breath in and out, releasing. Any kind of feeling that's holding you back from being right here, right now. Okay, and I invite you to open your eyes. Thank you. That was just a couple of minutes of moving our attention away from our heads. Often our grief can be so stuck up here, the thoughts and memories and even negative, distorted thinking that take us away from paying attention to what's going on in our body. And I think it's really important to do that, to scan your body every day, every hour, every moment, to just notice where that tension is living, because grief lives in our bodies. Okay, I'd like to open again this presentation with a poem. This is called All Hearts Break. All hearts break along some invisible inherent fault, laid down day by love and longing. It is a work we do diligently, this building constantly around a break that cannot be seen until that moment when the shattering starts in. Our hands half unexpectedly showering out shards, cutting and weeping, where only moments before there was a dear thing in the palm, shimmering and beloved. All hearts break. Okay, I want to invite you to sort of imagine you're a bird and you're flying from where you are, where your body is, and flying overhead, way up into the sky. And I want you to now look from the bird's eye view down in your life and all that's happened in your life to you. And I want you to think of the bird's eye view of what matters most to you this holiday season. What really is important to you? You know, there could be presents, there could be travel, there could be gatherings, there could be cards, but like the big picture, what matters most. And you're welcome to put that in the chat. Staying healthy, light, loving, gratitude, family. Thank you. Thank you. Good. Being with family, health and well-being, exactly. Spending quality time with people you can connect with deeply. Thank you, Jen, Joy. Lisa, good to see you. Have your 3 children home. Christine, positive mental health. Amen. Memories. Rita, absolutely. Connection in all forms. Friends, family, nature, dog. Carol, yes. Quiet. Being outside, Shelley, yes. That restorative connection to nature. Not feeling too lonely, Tracy. Amen to that. Connecting with others and having music, lovely, absolutely. And we've got a couple more. Balance. That's so important, Susan. Yes, solitude. Johnny, surrounded by love, all forms of love, right? That is a beautiful way to phrase it. Nice. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Okay, so this question, I think, is the heart of our talk. You really don't need to listen to anything else except this slide, to set an intention for yourself of what matters most this holiday, and hold that intention closely and deeply every moment until January 5th or 10th or whenever the holidays end, close to you, and prioritize that. So the mixed feelings are very natural and understandable this time of year. I always sort of, after my friend died December 17th, had this ache in my heart when I would hear the song, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Particularly this line, through the years we'll always be together if the fates allow. And how that is not true. It's not possible. It is a hope, a wish, a yearning and a longing, but it is not a possibility for everyone. So naturally, that mixed feeling of having celebration and beauty and love and music can be very bittersweet with the absence of our loved ones. And so, of course, the time of celebration, what are we really celebrating? And again, I offer this question to you as, again, an opportunity to look at the big picture. For children, we celebrate presents and Santa Claus and all the things that the holidays have been kind of made into. But what are we really celebrating, even in grief? So I offer these holidays, and let me just say we are very Northern Hemisphere centric, because the Southern Hemisphere is having a completely different season. So I acknowledge that. But these are some of the holidays. I might have missed a few, depending on your traditions. What is the common thread in all of these? And I'm listing them here, the metaphors of this season. Starting with Thanksgiving, to have generosity in scarcity, the pilgrims, the Thanksgiving story, at least as we were told it. We all know there's another side of that story too, but generosity and scarcity, kindness, human goodness, gratitude. Thanksgiving is a time of gratitude, even when we are not grateful for the disease that came that took our loved one, or the incident, or the addiction, or the turmoil, the pain, whatever happened to lead to grief. We're not grateful for that stuff, but maybe we are presented an opportunity to still practice gratitude in our grief for the time we had with our loved one, for the opportunity they have, for the time they had with us. Peace. The story of Jesus is supposed to represent peace amid uncertainty. And this next one is a big one in all of these holiday traditions, Hanukkah, Diwali, Christmas, that there can be light amidst darkness. There can be something shining brightly, even in the darkest time of life. And this is grief, that even in grief, there can be some light that holds us up, that gives us moments of joy, moments of delight, of comfort, of peace, even in this huge umbrella of darkness. There can be long-lasting light, despite, and this is the metaphor of Hanukkah, despite the struggles and the turmoil, there still can be a light that shines a very long time. That in the death of someone close to us, as evidenced by Susan's lovely introduction, my organ donor, as evidenced by his life that ended too soon in 2004, that continues to give life to me and a couple of other people. His legacy continues. And likewise for people who have a foundation like Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, or people who are as part of a community. This season is the oh goodness, the name is escaping me. There's a special event in November for people who've lost loved ones to suicide, walk through the night or something like that, to represent the light that continues to shine from loved ones who died by suicide in the lives of their survivors. So the season represents rest and recovery in chaos. If we think of nature, the leaves are falling off the trees, the snow is falling on the ground up in the mountains and in other parts of the country. That is nature's signal that it is time to be still. It is time to wait and just be calm and witness a great deal of processing and growth happening in that stillness. Hope in despair, and belonging and togetherness. A lot of these faith traditions involve people getting together in darkness to bring light through community, and that's what we're doing today. So no matter what your faith is, these are some themes to keep in mind. What adds to suffering during this time? I just wanted to offer this, that light and darkness is not necessarily a duality. Either we're happy or we're sad. I think one of the things we have to think about during the holidays is how do we carry both things, all things, allowing for that experience to be all of it. Joy with the grandchildren, deep sorrow that grandpa's not here to enjoy this. Expectation, how it's supposed to be. Well, we've always gone to mom's house. Well, we've always done this or that. The expectation that that time was supposed to continue forever. And yet, that's not how life works. Peer pressure. This adds to suffering. Well, everyone else is happy and everyone else is cheerful and laughing and drinking their eggnog. I'm supposed to be like that. Well, that's kind of unfair to recognize the waves of emotion that naturally arise with grief. And then permanence. I want it to be like it was before. I want it to be like it was before. That's connected to expectation. That these things add to suffering. These are this is our normal humanity, right? To feel these things like expectation or permanence or wanting to be like others. And yet we have to question, is that helping us or is that not serving us? I love this quote that really, I think, is very apropos for the holidays. Hope is confrontation of darkness. Hope is confrontation of darkness. So if you've had a really difficult year in grief or in transition, in change, or with COVID, then this time of year is an opportunity to reflect back on this past year or two of darkness and cultivate hope. That's the light of the season. The hope that next year will be better. Certainly this year is better than last year. The hope that next year you'll feel a little better, that the grief will settle somewhere in your heart, that you'll have longer waves of peace and comfort and even joy, and shorter waves of intense sorrow. That hope is so important to cultivate. And I just have to acknowledge COVID and how isolated and fearful we've been for 21 months. That's a long time. This is also the season of emergence. We had our little scare in August, July, August with Delta. Little by little, people are getting out and traveling and having to balance the emergence in the real world with risk. And the goal of any kind of health threat, like if you've gotten sick or if you've injured yourself, the goal is to recover fully and to enjoy life again. And that's what I hope for all of you. And this vaccination time has allowed us to think kind of holistically about our holidays, that, you know, before we really prioritize focusing on our physical health because the threat of the virus was quite significant, but now maybe we can think about our emotional health, our social well-being, our spiritual well-being, how important it is for you to gather in a place of worship, if that's important to you, and balance the risks and the trust in our own body's protection and our own body's ability to sort of be safe in this time. And planning is more important than ever this holiday season to reduce risk. I imagine we all remember what happened last year with the surges of the virus. And I don't know about you, but I'm certainly kind of bracing myself to see what happens this year, but that we can plan and still, you know, create some hope for activities and practices that give us more joy than last year, but also things we can do to protect and reduce our risk. So I'm going to start talking about grief now. And some of you who've been in a grief group, this might be very, very basic and easy to understand. It might even seem obvious, but I want to start with the basics. For those of you who are newer in your grief response or who have not participated in these kinds of events before. So basic truths about grief. Grief is a form of love. The more love we have for the person who died, the more pain and sorrow and grief we will experience. They're two interwoven aspects of attachment, and love and loss go together. And grief, we define grief as the range of reactions and responses to losing someone or something to which we have a strong attachment. We are biological beings. We are animals. We are not separate from nature. So we bond for protection, for safety, for security. And when we lose someone, our world is turned upside down. It's natural to feel insecure and uncertain of ourselves without that person. We all grieve in our own ways. It can be physical. That's why I did the body meditation. It can be emotional with lots of chaotic feelings, and we'll talk about that. We also can grieve in spiritual ways and social ways, relationally, not wanting to deal with people, and so on. And of course, our relationships with the person we lost and how we love them is unique, and therefore our grief is going to be unique. Even in a family, siblings, parent versus child, will grieve the same person who died in a very different way. And that there's no right or wrong way of grieving as long as we're not harming ourselves. A little bit of numbing, if it means taking 2 or 3 glasses of wine at night so you can sleep, is okay. But if you notice some abuse of that alcohol or some abuse of other kinds of coping mechanisms that are not serving you in the long term, those deserve some full attention and some support. So here is just a graphic of the waves of grief. Everyone grieves differently, but there are some patterns that we see. I like this sort of cycle because it implies that it's not just a one-way path. We can actually go in circles in our loss experience, from shock, and that usually is the first maybe 2 months, protest, which is like, I don't want this, fist in the air. I want them back. I don't want them to be gone. I refuse to believe this. That kind of protest can last a long time, depending on your situation and who you are. There's disorganization emotionally, personally, socially, physiologically. We can kind of go haywire in our bodies. And then little by little over time, there's this reorganization, this emergence of your new life, a re-engagement in new life and new people, and a new kind of equilibrium or homeostasis leading to recovery. But then comes along Christmas and we can revert back into the cycle, or then comes along an anniversary or Mother's Day, or the anniversary of the diagnosis. And this cycle can come back to us, that it is not a linear path. And so marker days is what I call the holidays or any other significant day that can heighten grief and sorrow. So I wanted to share with you this graph, which I think is lovely. It's from Shades of Hope, Teeny McCarty. And we all have feelings. We are, animal beings. Just like animals have feelings, we have feelings. And some of those feelings live in us, and it's up to us to process them, to acknowledge their existence, to allow them, to be patient with those feelings, but also to notice how they are carried in us. So anger, especially for women, is not always allowed or permitted, but the truth is it's part of being human. But if we carry anger and allow it to stir and dwell and grow, it can become rage. But really, I think the purpose of this graph is to ask yourself, how is this emotion serving me? What is it offering me in an adaptive way? Why does it exist? The goal of anger, hopefully, is to turn it into a gift, and a gift might sound like too strong a word, but to turn the anger into something, into strength, into energy, into motivation. Remember Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. Their children were killed by drunk drivers. What did they do? They motivated to create this advocacy group. Fear can be panic or paranoia. We can become agoraphobic because of COVID, or it can lead to wisdom. How do we carry our fear and not let it dominate our lives? How do we let our fear motivate us to protect ourselves without dominating our life? Pain can lead to depression and hopelessness, or healing and growth. Loneliness to isolation, or a cue to reach out and reach in, to sit with yourself and be your own best company. Shame can lead to worthlessness, or humility and humanity. We're all the same. We all have been through difficult experiences. That's one of my mantras, is everything I'm experiencing, everything I've felt before is what other people have felt. I'm not the only one. So you can read the rest of the slide and you'll have a copy of this afterwards. So I just want to leave you with that question. What is this emotion serving? How is this emotion serving me? And we touched upon this, but the grief feelings are the most intense emotions. And it's important to practice mindfulness. What is mindfulness? It's the non-judgmental awareness of your feelings. And also self-compassion, to say, okay, well, this is a tough time of year. When I walk into Macy's, I get a surge of sorrow, and that's okay, just to notice that. And resist the temptation to judge yourself and should on yourself. Like, when we don't have the energy to should on ourselves, because shoulding is not very helpful for our sense of self. What's wrong with me? Why can't I hold it together? What's my problem? It's just Macy's. Those are thoughts that can enter our minds that don't necessarily help us. So how do you not turn away from grief, but rather tend to it in a loving way? Just like you would a friend. If someone was grieving the death of their loved one and the holidays were hard for them, would you tell them, you really should get it together? Why are you crying right now? No, you probably wouldn't. I don't think you would. You'd probably be very compassionate to them. And that can be helpful as a form of self-compassion. So it's important to honor all feelings. And I know some of you know this, and this is kind of obvious to you, but it's in our culture in America, we really do have a happiness-focused culture. And the danger of that is that we think that sorrow or other difficult emotions are bad, and it's not good to have them. It's better to be happy. It's better to be cheerful. But just to remind yourself, there's no good or bad or right or wrong feelings, and that grief itself is including grieving what was and what wasn't. Most of the time in our groups, we have people coming to grief groups because they loved someone so much and they are in deep pain because they lost them. But we also want to make space for people who had a very difficult relationship with someone and are angry and wish that person wasn't the way they were, and they wish they had a parent who was a different parent. And so I want to honor that the holidays can sometimes bring up difficult memories of our childhood, of our family of origin. They can bring up memories of alcoholism, abuse, trauma, poverty or lack, criticism, blame, shame, and other kinds of unloving treatment from family members. And these memories live with us. And when the person is gone, they can add to some sort of ambivalent feeling towards that person. And that it is okay, just like we need to honor all feelings, to be glad and even relieved that someone is gone and those times are over. And we can grieve that, grieve what we didn't get, grieve what we didn't have, and grieve the pain that these memories hold in us and work through them. So I'm going to shift now towards energy, which I think is a really important topic in grief. That grief consumes a huge amount of energy as we process and sort of find a way to have a new life without the person. So I love this graph. Some of you might have seen it before. This is the energy management model, and I'm forgetting the person who created it. It's a way of looking at grief. If some of you are early in your loss, the first circle represents how grief is a very dominant kind of source of energy consumption in our lives, that it takes a huge amount of energy just to make sense of, wrap your mind around, understand what happened around grieving and adjusting. It also means, changing the paperwork, the bank accounts, all of the things, the funeral planning, everything that you have energy for has to go into grief-related stuff. And that there's only a small amount of energy, the gray part, that is for survival, taking a shower, going to the store and eating, getting the oil changed or the dentist, the things in life you have to do to function. And then as time passes, we notice that survival can kind of expand a little bit. Maybe now you can, make an appointment for a task that you need to get done, an accountant or things like that. But you have a little less grief, but it's still dominant. And then as time passes again, you have a little more energy for what we call life enhancement. So life enhancement means things that fill our life with meaning and purpose and fun and engagement with others. So hobbies, for example. And then finally, over time, our hope is that you have much more energy for life-enhancing activities and more energy for survival, including things like your career growth or volunteering or things that would connect you to people and to goals. And grief is always there. It's always going to be some sort of sliver in your energy, but maybe not as big. And so there's no time frame. It's not like this is 1 year, this is 2 year, this is 3 year. No. It's whatever it is for you. But to acknowledge that maybe this year, the energy to put up the tree or to send Christmas cards out might just not be here for you. And it's important for you to listen to your gut. We always talk about self-care. It's almost an overused word. But I want you to think about self-care in this term. We all have things we have to do. We have things we don't have to do, but we want to. And that often we're stuck with the things that we have to do and we don't want to, like the taxes, like the chores in life. But self-care is about shifting to the want to. And isn't that what a holiday is about? A holiday is to give yourself a break, a time for self-care. Now, many of you are your experts in your own grief and in your own life and strengths, so this might be really obvious. But some of the coping strategies for the holidays are things like planning, even for the 1 year anniversary or the birthday or your birthday without your person. Planning ahead to think about what do you need for yourself that day to get through is really important. Trusting yourself, your gut feeling, setting limits. I'll go to the party, but only for an hour, only for 10 minutes is fine too. Staying calm rather than getting all agitated and wound up. Delegating, okay, can you just go to the store and buy me a bunch of gift cards? That's all I can do this year. So something like that. Making an effort. Sometimes we just have to white knuckle ourselves through the holidays for family, for the grandkids, just push through it while balancing all this other stuff. And finally, letting go. Maybe you always were the perfect host and the perfect kind of holiday planner and party presenter, but maybe you need to let go of that idea this year So being honest with what you want and need, allowing yourself to change your mind. It's okay to say, I'm going to make some last minute decisions. I'll see how I'm a yes to the party for now, but just know I will be changing my mind up to an hour before. And having boundaries with others, not allowing people to push you into a place of discomfort. So these are self-care choices that we make every single minute of our day. How are we going to honor what we feel? Take care of our bodies, eating, sleeping. Sleeping is a big one. Exercising, stretching, whatever you need to do to move the energy through your body. Pursuing joy, interest, and pleasure. If it's really hard for you to experience positive emotion, that's okay if you're early in your grief. If you're a couple years into your grief, or even a year into your grief, and it's still very difficult to experience positive emotions, I would encourage you to take a closer look at that, because grief is naturally comes in waves and naturally allows us to take a break from grief so that we can focus on something else that gives us some in the moment pleasure and positive experience. Being with others sometimes is a self-care choice. Saying no, self-compassion we talked about, forgiving oneself. And again, lowering expectations that maybe this year you'll have a Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner from the grocery store or whatever, the restaurant, that's okay. Traditions, and every family, every individual has certain traditions that maybe you've done since you were a kid, traditions that, brought some sort of familiarity and predictability into your holidays, and those things are really important. But when the person isn't there to continue that tradition, it can be incredibly painful. And there are many choices you have to continue that tradition. You can appoint someone else to take charge. You can skip the tradition, or you can add a new tradition. And I can't emphasize enough how important ritual and even ceremony can be to soothe our sorrow. It's a way of putting our hands onto our grief and doing something with it, whether it's lighting a candle, whether it's having a special ornament, an angel ornament, or whatever suits your belief system, and putting that on the tree. This year in our holiday group, we're going to be writing a little note and rolling it into a beeswax candle so that people can burn the candle and burn the message to let that light release into the universe. So those kinds of rituals can be very meaningful. Even just sitting at an altar Christmas morning for however much time you need to be with that person can be soothing. Going to the grave site can be a new ritual, whatever works for you. So again, I talked about plans. Planning is so important. With whom, what, how, when, what is plan B or plan C for yourself as we unfold these holidays? And this is a sweet little meme that I found that acknowledges the loss of someone is really hard during especially the first holiday, but even after. The presents not bought, the empty chair at the table, those things are going to ache in your throat and your chest. So I want to talk about continuing bonds. Maybe you've heard that before in the grief world, that we all naturally possess an instinct to sort of find a way to connect to someone, to make up for the missing and the yearning. We need that. It's natural. Children do it naturally, and adults do it as well. That it's our way of healing the pain. So my question for you, is in what way will you honor your loved one's absence and non-physical presence this holiday? What will you do to honor their absence? This also means honoring their presence and what they offered you in your life, but also honoring their absence in particular is acknowledging what you're going through this year. And now I'm going to switch gears a little bit to talk about social support, because this is so important. We cannot grieve alone. We are social animals. We're primates. Our culture of American independence and individuality is great, but it's also really damaging, because it sort of gives us a sense that we can do it ourselves and we can pull ourselves up with our own bootstraps. But in times of stress and sorrow and insecurity, it's actually not helpful. So relationships help reduce our natural stress response. There's studies that show that our immune cells, our stress hormones actually reduce when people are near us, and they make us feel safe. Social support benefits our physical health. There's lots of studies that show that loneliness is actually bad for our health. Different people offer different types of support. So will you feel emotionally upheld and able to confide in everyone? Probably not. But will it feel good when this person can cook you a meal and this person can help you with your flat tire? Yes, different people do different things. And then that we are living in grief with what I call the grief contradiction, that sometimes we just don't want to be near anyone. We need to withdraw. That's an energy saving instinct. But then on the other hand, we also want to be with people. We want them to just sit with us and be with us and acknowledge and hold us and be tender with us, or just be there. So that's the juggling that you're doing with the holidays. And that to follow your own heart is important, to connect on your own terms. Sometimes just a text is enough. COVID, of course, makes it more complex. And that healthy relationships require honest communication, boundaries, assertiveness, what I need, those basic I statements, I think, I feel, I need, I want, are so important, rather than aggressiveness. No, just leave me alone. That kind of aggressiveness might not serve you during the holidays. And self-worth. You do deserve to be invited places and to be included. And let me move to the opposite of social support, because I think loneliness is such an important topic for the holidays and for grief, that we don't realize that actually in our country, we have a pandemic. We've had a pandemic happening long before COVID, and that pandemic is loneliness. In part because of our social structure and that independence and individuality. Loneliness is rampant, especially in older people. Loneliness is your body's message. That feeling is a message that there's an unmet need that you have. It's a cue. Feeling lonely actually elicits a very similar stress response to having some kind of survival threat. So if you think about in the ancient times, when we were in tribes, and the tribes being together protected us from the saber-toothed tiger. If the tribe kicked us out and we were out in the wilderness by ourselves, there's nothing to protect us from that tiger. So that's where we are coming from, kind of evolutionarily, is that being with a tribe is really natural in our bodies and in our minds. So it feels very unnatural to be alone. And some of you have maybe gotten used to it and adjusted, for sure. But definitely loneliness can reduce our sense of self and lower our self-confidence, because people serve as mirrors in our lives. They hold the mirror up to see how the qualities we have that make us special. And that loneliness as almost a physical and emotional state can actually make it harder for us to pick up the phone and call someone, and pick up the phone and get out of the house and go to that party. It's harder to cultivate courage when we have had sort of prolonged loneliness. And finally, I want to honor those of you who have gotten used to being by yourself, that there is something called solitude. And so loneliness is like filled with yearning and emptiness, and solitude is the act of being alone, but being filled by yourself. So being content. Well, maybe you're focused on a project, or maybe you like your own company. Maybe you're not troubled with the stress of other people. That solitude is the word to express how special it is, the glory of being alone, as Paul Tillich said. So if you're feeling lonely, there are ways to move towards solitude. It just takes time and it takes practice. And if you have been with someone for 40, 50 years, it's very difficult to transition towards solitude. It does take that time. And finally, I also believe we're all part of a web. That's part of our animal nature. We need connections, and maybe your web has had a major person missing from the center, but we have opportunity now to expand that web, to grow new connections, but also to see who else you are connected to. Maybe there's a neighbor you've just kind of said hi and bye to, but maybe this is an opportunity to sort of invite them for coffee outside and sit with them and maybe strengthen that web connection. That is the opportunity presented with a loss of a major person in your life. So I want to ask you in the chat, let's get some participation here. What kind of support do you need this holiday? What do you need? This is an important question to ask yourself, knowing that it could be a tough time if you've lost a loved one. What exactly do you need? You're welcome to put that in the chat. Time with family, yes. And time being alone, yes. That balance, right? Like a swing or like a pendulum needing to balance. Honest and genuine presence. Thank you, Candace, for saying feeling included, being a part of a belonging that is so basic. Yes, Rita, thank you. Being with family and friends is one thing, but being with family and friends who understand and get and acknowledge what this year is like for you. Okay, isn't that interesting? We've got people who just want to be left alone, and we've got people who just don't want to be alone. So there's that contradiction, right? Everyone's different. Activities, kindness. Yep. Thank you, Maria Elena, for saying feeling love and giving love. That's one part of social support, that sometimes if we have capacity and energy, that giving to others is a way that we give to ourselves. Susan, thank you for being honest. You're not sure yet. So this is a question for you to ponder for yourself. What do you need for yourself this holiday? What kind of support? Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Joan, you said creating a plan. And if you leave it to spontaneously connecting, I won't get there. So like I said, that's okay to make some last minute decisions unless you know yourself really well and know that you need some kind of structure or plan. Okay. Yep. Thank you, Doris. Friends that don't try to fix you. That is so important in grief. We get so much unsolicited advice. People have a hard time sitting with pain, so they want to tell you what to do to fix it and make it go away. But the truth is sometimes we can't make it go away. We just need to allow it. For sure. And so my invitation to you, Doris, is to think about what your response will be when people do say, well, you know what you need to do da-da-da. At least he's not suffering anymore, or whatever the comments are to make the grief go away. Like, what would your response be? And Sandra said, solitude is also where difficult and dangerous prisoners go. Okay. Yeah. Solitude is the glory of being in ourselves and with ourselves. Yeah. Without being in that prison, being in the four walls with no sunshine or time out. Yeah. Huge questions. You're right. So, Sandra, I just want to acknowledge, if I'm understanding your question correctly, that loneliness and solitary confinement go hand in hand. It is like a punishment. I think some of us have felt that in the past year with COVID, and it's no comparison to true prisoners who are really, really in four walls, but that it can be very, very challenging, mind-boggling. Thank you, Johnny. The people who tell you to get over it. Sadly, those are people just haven't been there yet. Understanding friends. Good. Thank you for those of you who are typing in. There's so much wisdom in our group here. So I have just a couple more sections and then I'll be done and we'll open it up to conversation. I want to talk about confidence. This is often the unspoken theme in grief that is so important for healing. That grief is naturally rocks us off of our self-confidence. People in our lives, like I said, are mirrors and reflect us and give us a sense of confidence. So when we've lost a close person, sometimes we've lost our identity. Sometimes we've lost our purpose if we've been a caregiver and focused on the other person for many years. Sometimes we lose trust in the world and in safety. And if a random accident can happen and take your loved one away, then how are we supposed to trust that we can walk out of our homes and get in our car and be safe? And how can we trust that we can keep our children safe if something so difficult has happened? So and plus there's that part of grief, the could have, should have, would have, the guilt that can rock our self-confidence as well. I want to acknowledge that. And for some of us, we have new challenges, new tasks to conquer. Maybe your spouse always did one thing and now you have to figure it out. So that learning curve and that not knowing can make us doubt ourselves. And that's combined with aging. Perhaps you're in your 80s and now you have to learn how to do the taxes. And that's really difficult to do. And I talked about this, and it takes patience to recognize one's own strengths. So how do we expand self-confidence? We get out there, right? We push a little bit, we take risks. We have to engage in the world again, as hard as that is. We recognize the incremental steps that it takes to grow. I had a client once who said, like, guess what I did this week? And I said, what? And she said, I drove over the bridge. So this was somebody whose spouse had always driven over the bridge or drove. And so she had a little bit of a fear about the bridge and she did it. She pushed a little bit and got through. And then that grows the confidence. Oh, if I could do the bridge, maybe I can do Tahoe or something like that. Oops. Where am I going? Sorry. And then again, enduring and surviving the holidays or other difficult days is a reminder of your resilience. If you can get through the first year, first of all, if you can get through what you've been through, a loss of a loved one, you can get through that first year and that first holiday, think of what you're capable of dealing with going forward. Talking to yourself, reminding yourself of what your loved one loved about you, how they admired you. That's a form of continuing bonds, like keeping them here with you, talking to you in your head. You know, you're always really good at making new friends, or, whatever they said to you, to keep that present in your life right now. And finally, self-confidence can be expanded by reintegrating into your own interests, passions, and relationships. That's so important. Your life, you still have your life for yourself. And this, I'm not going to go through. These are ways to build resilience. You can look at this when you get the slide deck later. So I want to ask, like, part of confidence is recognizing your value, your worth, and acknowledging the difficulty you've been through since your loss or in the last year. So I want to ask yourself, what is a gift you can give yourself this holiday? And it could be one of those gifts that you actually put into a box and wrap and have a ribbon on it and put it under the tree for you. Or you can give yourself a different kind of gift. And again, I invite you to add something to the chat if you'd like. Thank you, Pat, for your comment. Aren't we all driving over a bridge? Absolutely. Yeah. What is your gift to yourself? Sam, amen to that. An all-day nap, the gift of rest, the gift of hugging and loving all over my family after 2 years of not seeing each other. Exactly, Sandra. Margaret, fewer expectations. Absolutely. Candace, the gift of patience, forgiveness. Carol, perspective. That is definitely a gift. Susan, self-care. Yep. Self-care in all its forms, external and internal. Nice. For those of you who can't think of something right now, I just invite you to ponder this question and prepare it for December. And if you haven't thought of something by December 24th, please sit down with a pen and paper and think of a gift you're going to give yourself. Yeah. Thank you, Christine. Acceptance that you cannot do it all. Yep. Sam, thank you. The intention of giving up something negative, whatever that is. Reduce expectations. Lovely. And I love how you can all learn from each other and take note of what ideas you're giving each other for gifts for yourself. Okay. All right. So bottom line is strategies for the season. To recognize that there are, to me, 3 things that really can kind of summarize what the season, how to get through the season. Number 1 is memories. Memories have so much power. They can be difficult, painful memories, and we can definitely lean in towards those and allow them. But we also need to deliberately shift our memories to the other side, to all of the memories, even the happy times, even the gifts that you got, even the kindness, if not from the person who died, well, then the other people in your life, because we need to experience this, the memories in a whole, full way, because the negative memories naturally carry more weight and can shift us into a darker, difficult place. The power of intention, just like the gift you're going to give yourself, the support you're going to know you need, and what kind of support you're going to seek out. The intentions for yourself this holiday. How are you going to make it more manageable, more doable? And then finally, the power of togetherness. How are you going to lean in towards those friends that are caring and supportive and acknowledge and bring up the person's name? Some people avoid it. And how are you going to avoid the people that don't? The people that just say, hey, how are you doing? Merry Christmas. And act like nothing has changed. So making a good choice of the people around you. So finally, I'm going to just skip. I want to acknowledge healing. Many of you might be in different places in your grief. And many of you may be healthcare professionals, mental health professionals, and are supporting people who are grieving. What does grief look like over time? That it is naturally becomes less dominant. It finds its place in our lives and in our hearts. And that can be difficult for some people as we move towards that, because some people feel like grief is their connection to their loved one. It doesn't feel right to grieve less. But the truth is, it's a natural way to move forward in your life. It does not mean love is going away. It means pain and sorrow of loss is going away, but love remains constant and maybe even becomes more dominant in a different way. We reintegrate back into our lives. And so I use that word, re-engage, re-enter, reintegrate, to do the things that bring your life meaning and satisfaction, including things maybe you used to do in the holidays, like baking bread or certain recipes. You'll notice an increased sense of pleasure, that positive enjoyment and enjoyment in life. You'll be able to talk about your loved one. Maybe it'll be the second or third year where you can light a candle and say that person's name out loud without completely falling apart. The first year I lost my sister, I couldn't say anything at the Christmas table. I couldn't, but now I can. And finally, some emotional and intellectual acceptance. Acceptance is the big word in grief, to know that this is your life now. You have no choice. This is your life. And what are you going to do about it? So I just want to acknowledge there are some things that get in the way of healing, self-doubt around what you did for the person, embracing ideas to change or control your reality, repeatedly imagining that the death didn't happen, anger and bitterness that you can't let go of, insistent belief that the death was unfair or wrong. It's very natural to be maybe angry at the doctor or the medical system. That is so natural. That's our attempt at control over something that didn't happen right. But over time, if those feelings are still eating you up, that is going to cost you more energy and derail you from your healing path. Lack of faith in adapting to this life, avoidance, excessive avoidance. Some avoidance is fine. If you don't want to go to the party, you don't have to. Like that's natural. But excessive avoidance is something to watch out for. Rejecting support from others. And finally, survivor guilt. Survivor guilt is the sense that you are not supposed to enjoy your life because they cannot enjoy it with you. So these are things that, as you can see from the vertical line, it's called a derailer. Derailer can get in the way of healing. I just want you to keep your eyes and ears out and your heart open to the possibility of some of these habits that might creep in, that might make the holidays a little harder for you and make your healing path a little harder over time. So I'd like to end, before we have our question and answers, I'd like to end with one of my favorite poems. It's a Thanksgiving poem for you to hold in your heart for the next week, next 10 days before Thanksgiving. And this is called Thanks for the Little While. It was written by a prominent grief counselor and advisor in the community of grief counselors. Thank you for life, for its good times and bad. Thank you for love, even when I can't feel it. Thank you for the love I used to share, for the arms that held me tight. Thank you for my family in faraway places, in different times. Thank you for the songs we sang, for the dreams we saved, for the smiles we shared. Thank you for the strength that eludes me now, just now. Thank you for the weakness that sends me to my knees. Thank you for the searching, the reaching, the hoping. Thank you for the bonds of memory that hold me in place in this universe, even when I don't believe in it anymore or forget what it is all about. Thank you, most of all, for having been blessed with the love I have known, even now when I fear I will forget it. Thank you for the memory and for fulfilling it full measure for me. It wasn't nearly long enough, but it will have to do. Thanks for the moments we danced. Thanks for the little while. From Darcy Sims. And I love this phrase I learned yesterday, Happy Vaxgiving. For those of us who are vaccinated, and I know everyone has their own beliefs about this, but this holiday is so much more different than last year. And thanks to vaccines, many of us can get together, have more choices. So we have so much to be grateful for with regards to our science and our innovation and medicine technology. And there's so many people who are grieving the death of a loved one this year. I think we're up to 750,000, I believe. And it's so hard to be grateful if you have experienced that loss yourself. But may you find little ways to practice gratitude this holiday season. So I am going to stop sharing, and I would like to invite all of you. You can put yourself into gallery. Thank you for your patience and listening, your presence. And maybe Susan, you're welcome to help me out here if I don't see someone. The count is way over 750. Thank you. Thank you. I'm one of these people who does not watch the news regularly for that reason.
Yeah. So Isabel, what I would suggest that people do, because we are not able to, there's too many people here, which is a wonderful thing to see if somebody's just waving their hand frantically there. So what we would encourage people to do is if you take your cursor and go to the bottom or top of your screen, there's a little icon that looks like the smiley face called reactions. And if you click on that, that will give you a bunch of little emojis, but at the bottom there will be one that says raise hand. If you click on that, that helps me organize who's raised their hand, who would like to say something, and the order that you've done that in. Well, everybody's getting brave. We're a very friendly group here, so please, if there's something that you'd like to ask, please go ahead. And what I'm going to do here is, Isabel, there were a number of questions put up in the chat earlier, and I would just love to go through these as people are gathering their courage. And let's see. And Jen, thank you, Jen Swain. I'm going to come back to you. Thank you for being brave enough to put your hand up there. Sam, somebody asked earlier about your graphic and where it was from. And Shelley, I'm not sure if you could put up in the chat what graphic
which one?
That would be very helpful. Sam Day says, how do you deal with the triggers which can pop up at any time without any warning? And I love this question, Isa. I was part of a support group for 7 years as my friends were dying of AIDS back in the day. And one gentleman came into our caregiver support group and his wife had died maybe 8 or months or a year earlier. And he said, I really felt like I had it together. I really felt like things were going well, and that, my day was more of my day was spent like doing the things, the tasks I needed to do, than really being just overcome with these waves of emotion. But here I am wheeling my cart down the aisle, and I got to the chicken area, and my wife loved chicken, and I just burst into tears looking at it. And I turned around to him and I said, it's so interesting that we think that we're kind of in charge of this here, but you weren't actively thinking of her, but what if she was thinking of you? Like that energy that was her is somewhere else connecting to you at that point, and that's what that was. I don't know where that came from. Like that wasn't an idea that I had formulated until he asked that, but it's something that I have really tracked with myself for decades now. And I'm hopeful that maybe there's some truth to that the energy of those we've loved is not far from us at any given time, though the physical separation, which is what we relate to so strongly, is just overpowering at that same time. So do you want to say anything about dealing with those triggers?
Susan, you are such a skilled grief counselor. Thank you for that gift of recognizing the possibility that a trigger is a message or a connection to that person and reframing it in a different way. That is such a beautiful way of supporting someone who notices these triggers. The word trigger, it comes from trauma. And so the trauma world and the trauma sort of treatment programs, they use that word trigger as a way to anything that sort of wakens up or opens up this strong emotional response to a memory. So yes, there is such a thing as traumatic bereavement, and trauma is huge. It's a little beyond the scope of this conversation. So I want to acknowledge that's where that word comes from. But in the grief world, as long as you haven't had a traumatic bereavement experience, I'd like to invite people to replace the word trigger with memory. I just was walking down the grocery store aisle and I had a memory. Because that's what a trigger is. It's a memory of how much your loved one loved chicken or something like that. And to allow triggers, the word trigger in trauma treatment, it has a negative connotation that it would lead to a reliving experience of that trauma. But in grief, I would like to look at it a different way, that it is a way to re-experience a memory, and that memory will bring up mixed feelings, some really painful feelings, some sorrow, the absence of the person is felt in a more intense way, as well as a positive feeling. Oh, remember when we tried that chicken recipe that was just so disgusting and we laughed and laughed, or whatever it was, to allow, that's the word, allow. I use that so much in grief counseling, to allow that trigger / memory to bring up whatever it brings up, and to acknowledge that that's how we process our grief. We confront and face and feel and experience our triggers / memories. So I hope that answers the question in a very brief way.
Thank you, Isabel. I'm still, thank you, Jen. I still see you here. I love Joan's comment here is saying, I need to create a plan for having fun and seeing people, because if I just leave it to spontaneously connecting, I won't get there. You are not alone, Joan.
Yes,
And
yes.
a way to execute it. Very wonderful.
Yes. I think I just want to acknowledge that, like in the pandemic, we've all experienced this sort of distorted sense of connection where we can feel like we sit by the phone waiting for it to ring, but so is everyone else, waiting for other people to come to us, when the truth is sometimes we're the ones that have to pick up the phone and call people and make a plan for ourselves. I don't know if that relates to anyone here, but that's something I've noticed, and some people have talked to me about that, of feeling more disconnected because our phone is not ringing. But the truth is we need to pick up the phone and call people if we want that connection.
Oh, I hate that part is true, Isabel, but it is. I find that with myself too. Jen, I am going to add you down here, and why don't you go ahead? It's wonderful to see you. Jen was a volunteer with us for many years.
Yes.
Now is living on the other side of the country, so it's great that we can connect like this.
Nice.
I agree, and I jumped on it when I heard that it was going to be both you and Isabel together.
I remember you, Jen. It's so good to see you.
When I attended those writing through loss workshops several times, and let me just tell you, I have my journal here with the writings, and I've been transcribing them into Storyworth.
Oh, nice.
So I can publish it.
Wonderful.
And it's been fabulous to go through. So I moved cross country a year ago, and so there are lots of things I want to say, and I also want to keep it brief. But part of, I'm an introvert, and I've moved, and we are in the pandemic, and I'm trying to connect with people. And so there was lots that you said today that resonated with me. Because my mom died 5 years ago, my dad 7 years ago, and my dad died at Christmas time. And I'm struggling at this point. And I think part of it, I came to the quote that we had in class was by C.S. Lewis, no one ever told me that grief feels like fear. And so that's something that struck me as I was going through my notes, and feeling that fear, and feeling the fear of getting myself out into this new community, and etc. So, there's lots to ponder, and more. I have the prompts from our classes, so I can go back and write some more. And then the other thing I wanted to comment on, the thing that you just commented on, the situation, the memories coming up, and how the question was, I don't remember, how do we deal with them, or how do we know what to do with them? And I just went with it. It was also in the grocery store, and it was a Thanksgiving time, and I was buying whatever I was buying, and I got to the cash register, and as I waited in this short line, the tears started to well up. I could feel the tightness and the warmth in my chest as I was grieving my mom. And, as I started unloading things, the cashier saw me and said, "Oh, are you okay?" I feel emotional now just telling it. I just was honest with him. I said, I just lost my mom a few weeks or a couple months ago. And this is my first Thanksgiving without her. And it was so sweet. I think it was a man. He came and he asked if I would like a hug, and he gave me a hug. And it was just so beautiful. So if you can go with it, not everybody's going to offer those types of things, but that was just wonderful.
Beautiful.
So being real and allowing myself to feel those feelings and let the tears come. It's okay.
Lovely, Jen. Thank you. Thank you for your sharing and for that authentic realness with your tears, and even with strangers, just to allow them. And what you're doing is actually what tears are intended for. They are created so that people around us will come to us. They elicit compassion and support. And for some demented reason in our culture, we think tears are something you're supposed to be ashamed of and hide and do in the shower by yourself. And that doesn't serve the purpose of tears. So I love that example. And then going back to your other comment, I absolutely agree that fear is, I think, one of the most difficult emotions to live with. And it's sort of part of our deepest humanity, right? We're all walking the path of our lifetime, trying to straddle fear and courage. And especially in an uncertainty, with newness and unfamiliarity, in a new environment like you are. So if I was to add another word or add another slide for this slideshow, it would be about acknowledging courage and bravery, and to recognize it in yourself, that talking to strangers could be an act of courage. Asking someone you just met out to coffee is an act of courage. That every effort to connect with someone takes bravery. And when it comes back to fear, another question that sometimes can be helpful is, what are you really afraid of? What exactly are you afraid of? Like, let's give that words. Let's try to understand it. Is it rejection? Is it judgment? And so then that can lead into, well, where does that come from? What kind of deeper part of you is having that experience? And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm just offering this to the whole audience. Sometimes, is that part of grief where we feel less than or lower than, or our sense of self has been shattered, and so we feel less self-worth. So there could be higher fear that people won't want to hang out with us. Like, where does that fear come from? So that's something to ponder as well. Thank you. So good to see you, Jen. I love your mobility. And you said something about being an introvert. I am one too. And so it takes extra courage and bravery to go out in the world with an introvert's perspective. But introversion does not mean we don't need social connection.
Right.
It just means we need a little bit more intimate social connection, one-on-one rather than 1-on-25. So, okay, I want to make sure we have time for Joan's question. Would that be okay? Let's move forward. Thank you, Jen. Joan?
Hi, I've loved this Zoom class, Isabel, really appreciate it. And I don't even know how to describe this question, except that everything I've read or heard about grieving keeps saying, sort of like you have to work through your grief. You need to, it's though there's this passage that I have no idea how to do it. And I lost my husband 9 weeks ago, and I am so overwhelmed by the experience. And in the past, I've done best when I've been in a group or I've done classes, and I love that. But I don't even understand the lexicon that I keep seeing and reading. There's a book out about grieving that I can't remember the name of it. as I read it, I've done mindfulness based stress reduction with the Zen Center and things like that. To wrap it up, just again, just feel like I'm failing at grieving, and I'm just so frightened because I feel so alone in it. And I think part of it was someone warned me, the first 4 or 5 weeks, everybody calls, sends cards, brings food, and then they drop off the planet.
Mm.
And I've always been the one, and my husband, who were the ones who brought people together, who celebrated. And my family's all on the East Coast. And now I feel like here I am, 74, and really so unclear how to do all these things that you've just announced. And by the way, sorry for this, but Jen Joy, I'm going to put my email in the chat. Will you please link up with me? Because I think I'm moving east. Oh, I would be so grateful. But anyway, I don't mean to hijack your class, Isabel.
That's okay.
And helpful. And I would, really, I sent you a private message because I'd like some guidance about this, but I feel like I'm truly out there in a new field of snow, and I don't have a coat or boots.
Yes, yes. Well, very good metaphor there at the end there, Joan. Thank you. And first of all, my condolences for your very recent loss. And it is so natural for people to be uncertain and unclear of where to go and what it's supposed to be like. But if working through your grief, you're right, it implies that there's some sort of checklist, and then you get through the checklist and you're done. But I think working through really means mourning. And the difference between grief and mourning, I just want to explain. Mourning is action, doing something for and with your grief. It could be like, physically having a ritual, joining a group, writing, doing something tangible with your grief experience. And also, I just want to say working through the grief means paying attention. Just paying attention to what is coming up, allowing it, noticing it, not judging it, not distracting and looking the other way right away. A little bit of distraction is okay for sure, but avoidance in the big way is like, I think, American culture's strength when it comes to grief. And Joan, doing this, joining a session like this, seeking out connection, like with Jen, I'll try to find your private message. I'm a little lost in the chat right now because I'm listening to you and want to pay full attention to what's happening here. But joining a grief group, connecting to those who understand and can show you the way can be so incredibly helpful. So I do hope this will be just the beginning of a dialogue, and I will certainly save the chat and keep in touch. As we're winding down and losing time here, I want to acknowledge way up somewhere in the chat, Maria wrote about what she's celebrating, and it is so beautifully written. Maria writes, "A gift of celebrating who I am, recognizing that I did the best I could and gave the most that I could to those that I lost." That is worth celebrating. That is so beautifully said, Maria. Thank you so much for that affirmation. And I hope all of you can hear Maria's words, recognizing I did the best I could and gave the most that I could to those that I lost, as a way to give yourself a gift this holiday. I'll be around for a couple more minutes. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you to amazing, spectacular, unreplaceable, phenomenal Susan Barber. So thank you for listening.
Isabel, thank you so very much. And I do encourage people, I'm going to stay here for a little bit as well. There's some beautiful things in the chat that people have suggested. And Isabel, thank you so very much. This has been really beautiful. I just on behalf of the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation, on behalf of me personally, thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom and your experience with us all. There will be a couple of events in December. I'm still putting them together, but I'm looking forward to showing the film Young at Heart on December 16th. It is a phenomenal film about a group of elders. They have to be over 75 to join this choir in Western Massachusetts. And unlike other choirs, you could imagine what they might be singing. They are singing rock and roll, punk, Bruce Springsteen, Neil Young, and they are absolutely fantastic. So there'll be some information coming out about that, and probably another talk in early December. So to all of you that are grieving a loss, a death of a loved one, a change in your lifestyle, this pandemic, please note that there are resources for you, and you are not alone in any of this. So thank you all so much. I'm going to turn off the recording. It will just take one moment. And I just again want to thank the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation that is also offering an 8-part series. It's been fantastic. It's Thursday mornings, 8 to 9:30 Pacific Coast time. Isabel is also participating in this. It's $85 for the 8 sessions for those joining at this point. We're about halfway through now, I think. They will be receiving the recordings that have been made, and you're welcome to participate. And I'm going to put the link for that up because it is just spectacular. Wilke Roig, who works on the international education branch for the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation, is located in Mexico. She's a Spanish speaker. The presenter she gets, everything is translated in real time to Spanish. And it has been a phenomenal series of people that we don't normally see here in North America speaking about death, dying, loss, and grief. So with that, I am going to turn off the recording, and thank you all again for being here.
Thank you.